I don't know 아직도 잘 모르겠어 하나도 근데 내가 안아줄 수밖에 없단 걸 이미 넌 알고 있을지도 그런 표정 그만 저 가만히 못 냅두겠어 그만 장난치고 이리 와봐
Welcome to the KYP podcast, our season finale.
Woo! Screaming out.
Oh, you guys are so enthusiastic about
Oh my
it.
god, yeah, just give me a high five, man. What's up, man?
Oh, wow.
We're here. We're finally here.
We're finally here, and so we wanted to do a big recap of the year. I don't think we have any topics that are impactful enough in a way where it's like, yay, let's end the season with it. I think just a reminiscence of what we did in season 1 and our experience as podcast hosts
Yeah.
would be a better episode. And so I think today what I want to talk about, number 1, looking back on season 1, and number 2, the biggest lessons we've learned really as podcast hosts and having the podcast. And number 3, we received a few questions. So let's do a Q&A from our audience. And I think we can start the show. What do you think was your favorite thing back in season 1?
Every time I come back these days and we drop you off at your apartment, you know, that's where we used to film. Now we're at the showroom. I get, you know, nostalgia almost, or I always think back to where we started, you know, in his studio apartment. And recently you made that clip for Instagram where, you know, you used our footage
All of our
from
episodes.
including our very, very first episode before we had Dany involved. Which was just in your apartment at your table. No mics, no cameras. And, you know, thinking back on that and looking at what our episodes look like today, it always gives me a, you know, reassurance that we're doing the right thing. I don't know if, you know, that's how you guys feel. I don't know if you think back to those days.
Yeah, so recently I went to Dany's house to drop off some videos through my phone. And, man, I just took a nap on his couch. I just felt comfortable. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah. You passed out on my couch while I was editing the podcast.
Like I was just so tired from work, and I came over, and it was going to take like 30 minutes or an hour. I think it took an hour.
Yeah, a good
to
hour.
upload everything. And, man, I just took a nap, and it just felt good. I felt like at home. And I love how you're talking about like looking at back at our first episode. I don't know if people saw it in the video, but we used my phone as the microphone.
Yeah,
and we put it in the middle.
Like my phone was filming and yours was the microphone. Yeah.
So we've come a long way. We got our own equipment. The first, like right before we started, we got the board, and just looking back, I mean. We got all these fancy things, but I think in reality, it's like, yo, man, we're homies. And it's really good to see you every time you come back from Toronto. It's always great to be working with Dany and just hanging out at, like post or pre-podcast. So all in all, man, it's been a journey.
That's a very great point. Like outside of the podcast growing, I feel like our friendship, our relationship with each other has grown a lot. Like we've learned a lot about each other through these conversations. You know, part of it is having guests on, you know, trying to build a platform to you know, spread the love and share Montreal's finest with the world. But part of it is a little kind of therapy session for ourselves. You know, I always find it very therapeutic to come every couple months, you know, get away from the Toronto life and reassess. I always go back feeling renewed. And, you know, going back to the topic of looking back on season 1, when I think of the progress we made, I feel like there's a few different areas that you can categorize it in, right? One is the setup, like our equipment, you know, how it looks, the audio production, video production. One is our actual ability to conversate on a podcast format, because
stuff
that was not ready outside of the box, let's say, right? Dany, I want to take this opportunity to ask you to reflect on where our skills began And
Oh yeah, rate us. You rated us back then. Yeah.
Put us, set the mood. Like, you know, you've agreed to do it with us, and you know, we finally sat down with microphones, and then you started to hear, you know, where we were at and how we progressed.
So I think first things first, you know, when people start a podcast, a lot of people aren't really media trained.
Yeah.
And so they have a tendency to just talk like they're normal friends, right? And I think the biggest mistake a lot of people do when they're on a podcast is saying like, yeah, this thing yesterday we did, or you remember this morning, like we were doing this, like how I destroyed you in basketball. I think not giving the context to an audience, right? It feels like an audience is listening onto a conversation or a running gag between two friends or three friends. And I feel like a lot of times we were in that position where we're talking a lot about ourselves and not really talking to an audience. Because now that we have an audience and we have some people who actually listen to our podcast, it's important to take advantage of their listening, their time, to actually educate them, to like let them know how we feel. They listen to our podcast for a reason, right?
Yeah.
So we were always conversating about our own topic. We were in our own bubble, and we were mostly just rambling constantly about a topic.
Shooting
and
the
we
shit.
didn't have a proper, let's say, compared to now where I make sure that we have certain topics. I keep track of like the time. We were just rambling for 30 minutes to 45 minutes and hoping that we could get some good clips out of it.
Yeah.
So that's number one. I think number two, it's actually being a host, being there as a host. So when we used to do a lot of interviews, I think Kevin was very guilty of that because Kevin loves connecting with people. And by connecting with people, you also ask a lot of questions and you already know that person that comes on the podcast. And when certain people listen onto our podcast, a lot of people don't realize that, hey, I don't know that person and I want to learn more. And as a guest would start talking, Kevin would complete the words of the guest. And it's not a bad thing. It's a great thing that you know that person. However, a lot of people don't feel like they can hear something from a guest, right?
Yeah, for an audience, they're kind of confused. Like you didn't give the premise, you didn't
Yeah.
introduce them or anything.
I think the best example I can give is, you know, when you're in class and the teacher says, oh yeah, like this is this information. And as he's finishing, there's this smart kid in the class like, yeah, well, you do this. And teacher's like, okay. And he continues on with his next point. So you're not sure if the information is right because it doesn't come from the teacher. It comes from another person that is in the same position as you. What we want to hear is, hey, I'm in class and I want to hear this information to be correct from a teacher.
Gotcha.
Yeah. I think, you know, ironically, podcasts, people think about talking on a podcast, right? But ironically, I think the biggest skill I've picked up throughout these 2 years is listening. You know, I've learned to really understand what active listening means and tracking the conversation, not just like, you know, you forget what was said before, but tracking the flow of a conversation. It's kind of like we're making something together, right? It's a you know, piece of art or piece of
It's content, man.
It's content that we're creating together, and there's always a structure, beginning, middle, and the flow. So I've learned a lot of that, and it's helped me not only on the pod, but immensely in my personal life. You know, I apply a lot of the things in my career, which is very client-facing. I apply it in my personal life, getting to know friends just in a social setting. Like, I feel like my conversations go a bit deeper now. Before it would just be like, oh, hey, nice to meet you. Oh, you know, you play sports, or, you know, you watch the UFC fight, or, you know, the general stuff
Surface
you talk
level.
about. But
Yeah.
podcast has taught me to ask certain questions to really get to know a person, right? Like, you know.
I think definitely what you've learned is super interesting because I think that's the second topic that we should discuss about, like our lesson. I really want to get back on track and seeing like what was our favorite part of the podcast. And I think one of my favorite things to do right now is number one, meeting new people that I didn't think about meeting.
Yeah.
I think one of the highlights that we've had really was having Tyler and Kelly. Those were really great episodes because it was the first time we really started interviewing people who are, number one, loyal followers of ours, and number two, from abroad. I wouldn't say Tyler is abroad, but he
Kelly,
is kind of abroad, technically speaking.
Yeah, they're based in the U.S.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, our international guest.
International guest was like a first really milestone that we actually have something that can be mobile or people are actually wanting to come on our podcast outside of Montreal.
Yeah. Not only that, they're so knowledgeable in their field, and I felt like
And so young. Yeah.
we learned a lot from them, right?
Yeah.
My favorite was one of our locals, Mandy, when she was talking about how KYP podcasts would become a platform or is a platform now. We were talking about it off pod yesterday, but it was an eye opener for me because it's not just a brand anymore. It's not just a podcast anymore. We're opening our doors for artists, not only musicians, but for anybody that wants to promote their business, that wants to talk about their dreams, their passions. Like, we're opening our doors for people to promote their work.
Yeah.
And
Mandy was kind of referring to, she helps local artists kind of get started. And part of that is the media exposure, right? And so part of that exercise is looking at different platforms, whether it's, on TV, on social media,
radio. Yeah.
And, over the years, we've become one of those where we're one of the prospects that young artists would look at.
And it's unintentional. Like, I don't know if you guys had that in mind. Like,
not really. No,
when
she said it was like, yeah.
Who was your? Do you have like a favorite guest or something?
So, I liked all our guests
For sure.
Of course, yeah.
But for me, what was interesting is this podcast was almost a tool for me to reconnect with people from, in my life in the past, like many years I haven't seen.
Shout out Jenna.
Shout out Jenna. Shout out Daniel. People who I haven't seen since high school, like 10 years. And then kind of reconnecting, catching up over the pod and sharing their very interesting stories and journeys to the world as well.
Their stories are pretty unique as well. It's not
unique.
like I'm working at Deloitte or something. It's like one's a full-time artist doing walls outside in Montreal. Another one's like basically a pro basketball player, right?
Pro basketball player, yeah. I really, feed off that energy of people who are unapologetically pursuing something they love.
Yeah,
and
it was on brand, man. Good job.
I like to think all our guests, bring that aspect.
Yeah.
They could, still be working in more traditional or conventional career paths, but I think something our guests all share is a genuine passion and love for what they do, right? And I love that that's our message. And I'm just very happy with the progress we've made.
I think for me, one of my favorite guests would be for sure Bao.
Yeah.
I love Bao's
100%.
episode. Unfortunately, you weren't there. But learning a lot about, you know that feeling, I don't know, Kevin, if you had that feeling, but Jay and I, we definitely could relate. It's we're hanging out with people who have a large following, who have so much to teach you. But every time you meet them, it's just, hey, what'd you have for lunch?
Yeah.
Yeah, how's your day? How's
Just
your
your
family?
normal people.
Just they're normal people, and then they start talking. You realize, oh shit, okay, that's how they got to where they are because they actually know a lot. And our guest, your friend yesterday, Trevor. I think Trevor too. I loved having him on the podcast because he put me on my toes constantly to be. He was so on point with his answers because a lot of guests would tend to ramble a lot.
Yeah.
And I feel as a showrunner, I kind of feel guilty to tell them that they're rambling and cut them off short.
Yeah.
Because I feel that everyone, even though they're rambling, they have something important to say.
Yeah.
And so having a guest who is really on point, doing something and saying what he has on his mind, immediately I'm just like, oh shit, okay, I need to hop and ask him another question ASAP because or else like this conversation is gonna die flat on his face.
It's like tennis. He's a very skilled partner. He hits it right back at you. You have to be, you have to be on your toes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I felt that.
In terms of now that we looked at really the podcast guest, I really want to look back and see what was your favorite thing overall on the podcast beside, hanging out between friends and hours, between hanging out as friends.
Yeah.
Like, what was a thing that you really loved about this podcast?
For me, it was every time we had an episode together or even with guests, I would learn something from them, and it made me feel like I could relate to them in some way. Everyone's doing a different path. Like, we didn't have a fashion guy except for Claudio.
Yeah.
But even for guests that you brought, like Tyler, or we didn't post, but we had SK as well, or we had Kelly. Like, all these people are younger than me, but I kind of see myself in them when I was their age. Like, I was just pursuing it because I had nothing else to lose. Mm-hmm. And I kind of stopped and I pursued a career in a corporate setting. But these guys are doing it, and it kind of inspired me to keep doing what I started 5 years ago or 10 years ago with fashion. And I think that's like my favorite part. It is about people. Like, I think this podcast makes me feel like I'm not alone anymore. You know how I was talking about where when I was in school or when I was in college, I always felt like alone. I didn't feel like I could relate to anybody. But having this podcast gives us a platform to kind of relate to each other. And I would never like have talking to Jenna off the street or DM'd her on Instagram, we're in two different worlds, but her story and her pursuing it full time without any backup, that's so inspiring, and that's something that I would like to pursue as well.
What about you, Kevin?
Favorite part?
Just overall of the podcast.
I think, it's really helped me to see myself in a different light. Like, the person I am now is a person when I was younger I never thought I could be.
Yeah.
Like,
that's cool.
It wasn't in my cards, right?
Yeah.
And I always refer back to what I was like before, when you were posting your YouTube videos.
Yeah.
I always had such a big interest as a young kid, teenager. I had this yearning to see role models or examples in kind of the media world that reflected me. So I gravitated towards Asian creators, Kev Jumba, Timothy De La Ghetto, Niga Higa. And I always viewed them as, I would never be that, but it's super cool to watch them. And now I look at us, how James is kind of like the creative director. He gives us that look on Instagram. And now I'm a part of it.
Yeah, you're that guy now.
Someone looking from the outside, looking in. And now I see myself like that. And that's always,
that's a crazy, like
full circle.
Full circle,
it's a trip. Yeah, so I think that was big for me. How about you, Dany? What's your favorite thing?
I think for me, the biggest thing is definitely looking back and getting messages from viewers or anyone that just said, hey, we resonate with the message. Yeah. We really love the vision. We really love what you guys are doing. And even when I'm outside or I'm at a shoot, someone stops me and says, you're the one who runs the podcast with Kevin, or you're the one who runs the podcast with Jae, right? You guys are KYP. I love your stuff.
Yeah.
And for me, I just thought of it. I'm like, we have what, like 30 to 70 listeners on YouTube every week.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what are the chances that one of these 30 people is someone I come across on the street?
Yeah.
And for me, just being able to be out there and provide either wisdom or giving a voice to our guests, to an audience who are seeking either to listen to something or seeking validation, seeking help. I think for me, my goal has always been trying to help people and being there to change one person's life.
Yeah.
I think I was put in this world where if I change one person's life, I think I've done more than enough in my lifetime. And having a platform on where I can express my feelings, I can express my point of view, my vision to the world, and having the validation of people saying, like, I really love what you're saying. I really love what you guys are saying.
Yeah.
It's life-changing.
Did it motivate you to keep going?
Definitely. I think it's one of the biggest factors. I'm not doing this for me. I'm doing this because somewhere in this world, there is this little kid who doesn't know where he's going.
Yeah.
And he stumbled across our podcast and said, this is who I can be in 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
Oh, when we had that mom reach out to us on Facebook?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, what was the comment?
You know, something along the lines of, you know, when my son gets a bit older, I love to show this to him, you know, as good examples of male role models.
Wow.
Because I feel like, you know, that's obviously a big comment, but I think what we're touching on is, so a comment I get a lot is, I really like how you guys are all comfortable being vulnerable
Yeah.
on the pod.
That's a good theme, yeah.
And I feel like that's something you don't often see, you know,
In males?
in males,
Yeah.
especially on social media. You know, if we were the typical puppet, we'd be like this, you know.
Would have a Bugatti in the
Yeah,
background.
what's your body
yeah.
count? Do you
Yeah.
do cold showers? You don't
Yeah.
do cold showers?
Yeah.
Oh, you're fucking up, man. You know, like,
That's the toxic male trait
Yeah.
that's on social media right now.
the
yeah.
front is always up. And I feel like, you know, at least part of my intention with doing this is, you know, you can still be masculine, you can still be confident, while being vulnerable, because being vulnerable is really just being real. Like, the reality is everybody has problems. Everybody has worries, concerns, anxieties. You know, we all have mothers and fathers and brothers and sisters. You know, no matter who you are, you have those things.
Yeah.
And
We're all human.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So definitely now that we've looked at all the stuff that we are really thankful for the podcast, I think a big part of reflection is looking back at the biggest lessons we've learned with this podcast. Kevin, you mentioned earlier that it really made you learn how to be a better person and how to communicate, really. And I wanted to jump to Jae and see what was one of the biggest lessons you've learned in this podcast.
A life lesson?
Yeah, just a
Yeah,
life
yeah,
lesson
yeah.
in general.
Man, it taught me that, like, I don't talk. It taught me that I need to be able to have a conversation with people on a deeper level. Because I'm definitely like that guy that does not talk in a room, in a setting, unless someone is more extroverted and asks me questions, then I'll start talking. But generally, I'm very introverted, and it taught me that, like, if I don't talk, then I miss out on saying things that need to be said. You know, it could be advice, it could be how I feel, it could be whatever. But if I don't say it, then people won't know. And that's something that's in my relationships has been an issue, or it goes broader within my family, right? We've talked about all these, but I've learned that you need to be able to say what you think, and it could be criticism, but it could also be something positive for other people. So saying what you need to say, or even my experiences, I think it could help somebody at the end of the day. So That's the purpose of the podcast. And I'm so surprised if I told myself 10 years, if I was 10 years younger, I have a podcast. I don't even know what a podcast was 10 years ago, but if I told him I had a podcast, he'd be like, there's no way. Like you're the shyest kid.
Right.
You know? So, yeah, it's very short lesson, but it spoke to me on a broader level as a person.
Kevin, any other lessons you've learned?
I think it's really taught me to be comfortable with myself, right? I always mention in passing that when I try to listen to our early episodes, I cringe. And, it's not like when we were recording those, I didn't feel the same way. I felt the same way. But I think I'm just so proud of myself that despite all those worries, those anxieties, those, concerns of how other people would judge me.
Yeah.
That I kept going.
You overcame that.
I kept going, and it was very uncomfortable for me personally.
Yeah.
At the beginning, but the fact that I kept going is the reason why now I feel so comfortable in my own skin, that I'm able to just be myself, be vulnerable. It's okay. They might think this way, they might think that way, but I know who I am. So if they ever get a chance to speak to me or have a dialogue with me, I'm sure I'll be able to help them understand my point of view, right?
I also noticed, for Kevin, correct me if I'm wrong, when we first started this podcast, you always felt the need to prove yourself that you're worth it, that
100%.
you are the best sailor.
You are him.
You are him.
Yeah.
And so I feel a lot of times when we start the podcast, you really wanted to interject your own opinion, your own story. But as the podcast went on, you realize that, hey, I don't need to prove myself. People want to come on this podcast because they want to share their experience and they can relate to your experience.
Yeah.
So you didn't feel the need to say, yeah, I'm all of this, I'm all of that, and I'm relating to you. You just acknowledge what our guest said and say, you know what? I feel the same way.
So I it's kind of like the opposite of James. I learned that I talk too much.
I wouldn't even say it's talking too much.
Or I can dominate
Yeah, you tend to.
The attention. I realized I learned so much more about the other person when I take a step back and listen and ask questions.
Yeah.
I feel like I didn't ask nearly as much questions in conversations, not just on the pod, but just in general, before getting into this.
I agree. Same.
So that's a huge lesson I learned. And I realized looking back now, a lot of that came from insecurities. I was in a very volatile time in my life. My kind of career was uncertain. My future was uncertain. So yeah, I'm definitely the personality type to try to talk it into existence. You know what I mean? But I feel like if you observe me, as I get more comfortable with something, I kind of stop talking about it, right? And I think that's always been a way for me to motivate myself.
Yeah.
Right?
Manifest it out.
Yeah.
I think for me, my biggest lesson is coming from a person who has done multiple podcasts, who has worked on many projects. I think KYP has taught me that nothing has to be perfect to be released. I think you guys understand the amount of stress, pain, and like dissatisfaction I've had with episodes where we filmed multiple episodes for the past 2 years and we decided to scrap it because it wasn't up to my standard.
Yeah.
And looking back, we started with filming on a phone. Well, you guys started to film on a phone with an iPhone camera. And then I came in and then I said, hey, I have a shotgun mic. We could film it on a shotgun mic. And then I noticed, hey, we don't have individual tracks. So Kevin speaks a lot louder than James. We can't hear James. So now we need individual microphones for each. And then we filmed on a recorder and I said, syncing the track is really annoying. We need a board. So we started getting the board. We started getting everything. And I think for me, learning to say, I think what we have is enough. And I think people appreciate more the content rather than the production. Granted, the production does help a lot.
Yeah.
Was the biggest lesson for me. And just saying, let's pull back here. And we don't need to spend $4,000 on a set. We have everything we need. We just need to trust the process instead of trying to get everything perfect, trying to get the audio perfect, trying to prevent that car from honking from outside and restarting the take every time there's a door that slams. Certain things you can't control.
Yeah.
And I was trying as low-key of a control freak because I've basically being a photographer for 11 years, I've managed to take my process and make sure that every single thing that I do is routine and under my own control. I've removed every variable that can affect, and if something goes wrong, at the end of the day, it is my fault.
Yeah.
And so looking back at this podcast, when I look back at it and said, this podcast is not good, I've tried removing all the variables. So at the end of the day, it is my fault that this podcast is not running well.
I think we all have a part in the shortcomings and the success
But
of the
I
of the
think
pod.
for me, it was mostly like I've helped you guys. I've given you guys
Yeah.
criticism and comments and helped you guys
Yeah.
to talk on a podcast to either listen or to talk more.
Yeah.
And now that I've done my part, if you guys are doing your part and the podcast still doesn't come out right, then at the end of the day, it's my fault. That's how I think, and that's why a lot of
That's how you used to think?
That's how I used to think.
Gotcha.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
And that's why I scrapped a lot of episodes because it wasn't up to my standards.
Yeah, I think a lot of that had to do with we were
Inexperience.
so green. We
Yeah.
were so green, you know.
What do you mean green?
I'm like new beginners.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so probably made your, it made your vision a lot harder for the pod, right? Because, I wasn't aware. I couldn't even keep track of your hand signals, or like I could barely keep track of the conversation while thinking of my own thing to say. And so, I think that was the growing pains, right? That's when you first pick up basketball and you can't dribble with your left hand. You can't go between the legs, but
I still can't do that.
yeah. I'll show you.
So I think now that we've really had individual lessons based on the podcast itself, I do want to talk about one thing that I've learned a lot working as a team. And I've noticed that I can't be a lone wolf and that I need you guys to make this podcast work.
Yeah.
We all need each other.
Yeah, I think we looked back and we were so disorganized. We were so all over the place. We didn't have a recording schedule. We didn't know when the guest came up. So, I could be saying, okay, we're going to talk about this subject, and I could lead the topic. I don't mind. But if James and Kevin doesn't know what's going on in my brain, then they can't know what I want to go or where I want to say. So I've learned a lot to list out things in 3 topics and to lead a conversation to somewhere and help them get into the conversation. And I think that was a big lesson to learn with you guys, is that I tend to try to do everything and I assume that you guys would follow me.
So you always you always backtrack our conversations,
Yeah,
right?
sometimes.
But I feel like over the years working together, Dany became more explicit about sharing what he had in his head, right? And
Yeah.
I'm sure you found that, when you let us know, we were receptive and we were happy to cooperate.
Yeah, you guys did even better than I thought.
Yeah,
Like Kevin would hit with a question and I'd go, damn, I didn't think of that question.
Because before you mentioned the whole structure thing, it's not even in my mind.
Yeah.
I thought it was, I thought because of the nature of the podcast I listen to, it's all very free flow,
Go with the flow, yeah.
comedy, like Fun with Dumb, Tiger Belly, Joe Rogan. It's all very no
structure.
free flow conversation, right?
Yeah.
So I thought that's from my perspective, that's what a podcast is. But you probably, like you said, you've worked on many different podcasts, and once you laid out the structure and explained, why it's important to have it, I'm like, yeah, that fucking makes sense.
I mean, I think it helps us to stay organized. 'Cause sometimes we get lost in the topic. We just end up like, what do we end up first talking about?
We would lose track.
We would lose track of what we
so
actually
much.
started. Yeah. So, but for like as a listener, as a viewer, I think I do agree that organization does help. We're so ADHD sometimes, man. It's like, we be talking, especially our first episode.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
it
had
was-
to cut down 3 hours.
It was
of
2
like-
hours.
Like 3 hours of just talking about back in the day, the heydays. I don't know if we would be still a podcast if we kept going that way.
No.
But I also think in terms of podcasts, right? Kevin came up with the great idea to start the podcast, and he came to Jay because Jay had the creative vision, and then Jay came to me because I had the technical knowledge to do so.
It's a train.
And
Choo train.
in a way, we wouldn't be here without Kevin. So Kevin came with the knowledge, like I said, Tiger Belly, Joe Rogan, that, hey, we can just talk about whatever, people will tune in. But I think that's the biggest downfall. And I think for everyone who's listening to the season finale who actually wants to start a podcast, they need to know is that you don't have a reputation yet to talk.
You don't have a reputation, and also it's not as easy as it sounds.
Yeah.
It is not as easy as
We're
it
nobody.
sounds.
Yeah.
And so when we ramble like that, like I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, it feels like someone's listening in onto a conversation that they're not invited.
Right.
You don't feel welcomed.
Yeah.
And so having structure and having central theme, and that's why you guys noticed, right? As time went on, you noticed that I started all my intro like, welcome to the KYP podcast. My name's Dany. Here are my co-hosts.
Yeah.
And then suddenly I started shifting and said, welcome to the KYP podcast, a show about letting go of things that prevents you from being yourself.
Yeah.
About reaching your dreams and being yourself unapologetically.
You set the scene.
Yeah, I set the scene,
Yeah.
and then I list out the topics.
The mission.
Because within the first minute or two, if the audience doesn't know what we're talking about, they're going to check out.
Yeah.
And I think right now, with our reels and the structure, knowing what we're going to talk about, it really helps the audience retain. It really helps us retain our audience's attention.
Well, they
because
get
they're
intrigued.
excited.
Yeah, they get intrigued of the
intrigued.
topic. Yeah.
Yeah.
And like, it's not like they listen to every podcast like in a row. They would like scroll through. It's like, oh, I would like this topic. I like this topic. This seems interesting. Let's click on that. I think, definitely the hook. We talk a lot about, like, I've been doing a lot of research about social media and how to get more engagement. And the one thing is about hooking people's attention, because you're fighting for every podcast, every social media page is fighting for attention, right? For those 3 seconds.
You have to get to the point as early as possible in your title or at the beginning of the video, right?
Yeah, it's sad, but it's important.
Yeah, and I've noticed one thing too about our podcast. When we first started filming our podcast, and I told people, hey, I have this podcast with my 2 friends, people would say, what's your podcast about? And I'd have so much issue. I said,
It's about killing your pride.
I have no fucking idea, honestly.
The entire first year, like my friends would ask me
When we were filming and not posting.
Yeah. I would have like 5 different ways to explain it. It's never the same every time. But now, with the structure over the last, I would say, this year, I have it down. Like I know what it is.
Actually, I want to do a quick exercise with you guys.
Yeah.
If
We're each gonna explain.
if I came up to you and said, hey, James, hey, Kevin, what's the KYP podcast about? I would want you guys to describe the podcast in a line or 2.
Okay, I'll try my best.
All right, Kevin, you want to go?
So, just to sum it up, it's mostly an interview-based platform focused on showcasing and highlighting people who are pursuing their dreams. It could be creative, it could be professional, it could be entrepreneurial. To give you a quick idea, our motto is we celebrate those who are brave enough to pursue their dreams.
Damn.
I like that.
I'm kind of scared of doing mine now.
Jay, you want to go?
Man, I had it a bit more simple.
Yeah, hit it.
Okay. KYP podcast. Okay, ask me the question.
So, James, you have a podcast. What's a podcast about?
Oh, no. KYP podcast is it's a podcast about celebrating people who are following their passions, who are fully pursuing what they love, pursuing what they truly believe in. And we interview guests, not only creatives, but people in their professional fields, or it could be people in athletes, it could be professional artists. And we celebrate those people by interviewing them and giving them a platform to speak about their something.
Their journey.
Their journey, yeah.
That's really nice, actually.
Danny?
I
Hey,
think
Danny. I want to do the voice acting
Okay,
too.
do it.
Hey, Danny, what's the podcast about?
So we believe that there are many ways to success and happiness. And so we have a platform to share these many ways. And these are the stories of our guests.
Damn.
Yeah, more concise.
Yeah. It's tough putting on the spot, eh?
It's tough,
Yeah.
but that's, I think, as we went on with our podcast, that vision really
It's a bit
shaped-
clear now. Yeah.
Before
made
it used
so
to be like, oh, the
Oh, we don't
ego.
fucking know. We talk about everything and nothing.
We're just shooting the shit. Yeah, that's what we used to say.
I would start going into like psychological definitions of ego, and this is what, But now you see, even though we all had slightly different answers, the idea is the same. We're sharing people's stories, we're sharing people's journeys, and we want to celebrate those.
I had a question a few months ago on social media, and that person asked me, "Why pride?
Ooh.
Why kill your pride?" Because there's a bit of a different connotation with
Correct, yeah.
there's a movement called pride. So she asked me why pride, and man, it was like I knew this question would come up because I remember when Goody was promoting the clothing brand. People are asking on the comments and on TikTok, is like, are you a hater?
Yeah, you're a hater,
of pride? And it's like, no, it's
ego pride. Yeah.
yeah. So like swallowing your pride. That's what I would say. I don't like saying swallowing your pride.
Kill your pride is sexy. It's
I don't know. It's to the point.
to the point, right?
But yeah, I mean, it comes down definitely to. I don't know. It's such a deep question for me because that's how I started.
But it's
this whole
not
thing.
an uncommon concept.
No,
Like
Right.
no.
A lot of people have talked about it throughout history.
Of course.
My knowledge isn't that deep, so I'll go with a more modern example. J. Cole, he has a song, Pride is the Devil.
Yeah,
Right.
He's talking about how pride in the communities he's familiar with is at the root of a lot of the problems, right? People kill each other over pride. People lie, steal, cheat over pride. And I feel like that's touching on the pride you were referencing when you first came up with the name.
100%. And I love rap music, so it's definitely so. Basically, pride got away from me connecting with people like you guys.
Right.
Like before I met Dany, there was
So we all
Yeah.
knew each other,
Yeah.
knew of each other, but
Yeah.
pride was the reason why we would pass each other in the halls and be like,
Yeah.
that guy thinks he's so cool. That guy's wearing a suit. What's he doing?
so yeah. In the framework of fashion, it's like being prideful is like having designer clothes or having money or wearing the fly stuff, and with me and Dany, it was like, oh, this guy's doing menswear, I'm doing streetwear. We're like clashing, we're like streetwear versus menswear, who's better. And I used to hate on people wearing suits,
Yeah.
right? And so like for a while, for a year, like we didn't follow each other on Instagram, at least, even though we knew about each other, right? I saw him at the club once, and we didn't even say hi. We just looked at each other. And for you, man, like you didn't talk. Like we were friends from childhood,
We never,
but we never connected on a
yeah,
deeper level.
we never
right?
got to know each other. Yeah.
So killing your pride is like, go talk to, like, it comes down to my insecurity of not talking enough or being shy. It's like just go say hi, or just ask questions, like get to know the person.
I think for me, when it comes to pride, really, pride has to do a lot of being proud of what you are doing. But then pride does have a lot of, it has a sort of, how do you call it? That sort of vicious cycle.
Diminishing.
No, not a diminishing, but when you throw a snowball down a cliff and it has a
Snowball effect.
snowball effect,
Yeah.
it has a slippery slope of slowly turning into elitist.
Right.
That's exactly it. Yeah.
And so once you get to a point where you are so prideful of your work that you cannot comprehend the fact that other people have different opinions from you or different views on a certain point, or people do something differently than you, it starts becoming self-detriment to your development.
Yeah.
So when I look at kill your pride, it's not about celebrating like, hey, you know what you're doing, forget about it. But it's more about letting go of the fact that, hey, you are good at what you are, but it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to
Yeah.
not be the best in something and to ask for guidance, ask for a mentor, doing different things.
Learning new things.
Learning new
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
And
And it's all to get better at
Exactly.
what you're doing.
Yeah.
And, I know the name is Kill Your Pride, but I absolutely believe pride is essential to
To survival.
to
Yeah.
survival,
Exactly.
to well-adjusted person, to a person with ambitions and goals who are progressing in them. Pride is what makes you want to compete.
Yeah, of course.
You see, you lose at a game, you're like, oh, I can do better.
Yeah.
I'm much better than this. Then you're gonna buckle down and get better. But some people let that consume them, right? You're blinded by your pride and chasing that, whatever it may be, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's about having a balance. Like you need to rely on your pride in certain moments to
Yep.
achieve, and sometimes you need to let your pride go and pick up new skills and learn from other people to achieve. But doing both exercises is for the same goal. It's always, human beings were meant to adapt and progress and innovate. Yeah.
So now that we've gone through really reminiscing on season 1 and the biggest lesson, kind of want to have a fun segment. We've collected a bunch of questions from our viewers,
Here we go.
and I have other questions, and I have the people who've asked them, so we'll give them a little shout out. I'll do it. Now, the first one, we've kind of already answered it. It's from an anonymous person because I think Jay posted up an anonymous
Yeah.
Q&A, but that person asked, what's your favorite part about doing the pod?
Yeah. So definitely, meeting people from all walks of life, coming from a background where I was so kind of narrow-minded in the circles I would be in and kept, the fact that I get to speak to mural artists, to rappers, to communication coaches, or people in the fashion industry. That's crazy to me. Like if you told 18-year-old Kevin, like, why would I be talking to those people? They have nothing to teach me. So that's one of my favorite parts. And then also, I wanted to add, outside of meeting new people, getting a new perspective of people I know very well. Like you mentioned Trevor. I also brought Andy on.
Yeah.
Andy's my roommate. I see him every day. The conversations we had on here, I learned new things.
Yeah, of
Like,
course.
I'm on the show listening to him talk, and I'm like, what the fuck?
You never told me this.
Same thing with Trevor. I didn't know the details about his music and military.
Even for
career.
us, we've been telling stories about each other, right?
Yeah.
Right.
That we just never knew.
Right.
So definitely, some of my favorite aspects. How about you, James?
For me is, I guess on a broader level, less specific, would be two things: consistency and positivity.
Right.
Consistency is something I struggled with my whole life. So the podcast is the example now for me to thrive in my own personal life and in my career. I think consistency is important. Staying organized, being concise. Those are things I lacked as skills. So I'm learning new skills through this podcast. And secondly was, man, we're spreading some positivity out here. Like, I feel good about what we do. You know, like, you know, sometimes when you do things, like when you, let's say, I'm working corporate right now. Like, I don't feel that great about what I like do. You know, am I really helping people?
There's no like,
Yeah.
like, do you? Feel
I don't feel
that-
fulfilled. Yeah.
Right.
So when we receive those comments, you know, especially like that mom, or even our,
mom.
or even
Also,
our yeah,
Collins, I had a quick chat with him last time he was here.
yeah.
The word he used was uplifting.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I
You're
really
right.
like
You're right.
that. Yeah.
Uplifting. Yeah.
That's a good word.
Yeah. So it's we're doing God's work, man.
Slowly but surely.
Yeah, and indirectly, like I didn't
Indirectly,
think I'd be doing something because I haven't gone to church in a while, so I haven't you know like
Yeah.
done any charity or you know go help kids with that have needs, you know. But we're speaking on a platform that's spreading a bit of uplifting
Positivity.
positivity. Yeah.
Hard to find on the internet sometimes, you know.
Oh shit, it's negative out there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it sells.
Yeah, our content looks so much different than what I scroll on my feed. My feed is nonsense. But anyways, Dany, how about you? Favorite part?
So I already mentioned it earlier. My number one, it's my favorite thing about the podcast is really running a show.
Yeah.
I've always had a passion to make sure that the show runs smoothly, even though I'm not the highlight of it. That's why every year I come back to the Hallyu show
Yeah.
and I'm backstage. I run all day. I barely eat. I cut the guys' hair. I style their hair. I make sure that their rehearsal is on time. I make sure that their show is on time so that they don't have to pay extra. And that fulfillment to be like, yo, this show wouldn't have happened if I wasn't here
100%. Yeah.
is a lot more fulfilling for me. I don't need anyone to say like, hey, God bless Dany, you're the best. You helped our show run. For me, it's a personal fulfillment.
Yeah.
How I help a lot of my friends in the background. They never really shout me out, but they get me dinner. I'm a ghost in the back. I make sure that stuff runs. I make sure that everything is A-okay. I don't need any recognition.
Yeah.
But it's just that fulfillment that
You created something.
some stuff would not exist if I weren't there.
Yeah.
And I could create something. I think that was my favorite part of the podcast. And I also believe another favorite part, like I mentioned earlier too, is just receiving positive comment. Just the positivity behind everything.
It
very-
acknowledges your work.
Yeah, we're doing God's work out
indirectly,
there.
It's because it's, you know, what you put out there is a reflection. What you get out there is a reflection of what you put out there,
Yeah.
right? And everyone who's reached out has always been positive. So, you know, that tells you something.
We're still waiting for our first hater.
We've had many.
We've had a few, I'm sure, but
I'm pretty sure that guy who still says that you wear your headphones upside down is a controversial opinion.
you know, every time I put these bad
Controversial
boys on,
take.
I have to check. You know, make
Well,
sure-
actually, it was these ones because these ones
those
are
ones
on.
are more difficult,
Yeah.
right? But Dany, I was just gonna say, I know you have the questions up. I don't know how much time we have left, but I'd love to get through the non-anonymous questions. so
Oh
we
yeah,
can
no, I'm just running
Yeah.
through. We have time.
have a chance to shout them out.
So the next question we have is, what is your favorite moment in the season 1 by Nola?
Nula, yeah, shout out to Nula.
Shout
She's one
out.
of our very loyal supporters. She watches every episode. So
So actually, before you say that, I think Nola and Christina kind of have the same question. Shout out to Christina. She's sitting in the audience right now. Christina asked also favorite episode of the first season. So I think both of them can be combined into one question.
favorite part.
Both
favorite
both are
episode.
true first followers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have one in mind? I need to
First
think of
episode? I mean the best episode?
favorite. Yeah, your favorite, not the best. They're all good.
Man, my favorite episode Can I tell my favorite clip?
Yeah, that works.
Man, my favorite clip is it's definitely Kevin's.
Yo, the fish, the laptop.
Yeah, like any because I created those clips, so any funny clip I had of Kevin was just gold. Like I just find myself editing like alone in my room, and I just started laughing, and I'm listening to it 20 times because I'm editing it, right? And it's just like if I laugh at that clip, it's like this is funny. And yeah, there was that one episode where Kevin talks about getting caught masturbating by his dad. Like
fucking hilarious. Holy shit.
Like it was just, and man, just thank you for sharing those stories, man. Like in a different setting at a bar, you would never tell me that kind of story. But I don't know why you would tell me on a podcast publicly. But
I've gotten really bold. I got really bold.
Like thank you just for sharing that. Like it's a highlight of the year for that one for me.
Yeah.
Dany, you ever?
Similar to Jay, my favorite clip was when my dad beat me in my sleep. I spent so much time editing that footage to make it that real.
Yeah.
I think
you were faking to sleep, right?
Faking sleeping. Then my dad didn't even wait for me to wake up. He just smacked me while I was sleeping.
Jeez.
And I remember I just went like, yeah, my dad went, and all I heard was, "What the fuck?" And then you guys started laughing. It's like, just like daddy, just like daddy.
Yeah.
Just like that.
I really love that. I think in general, the clips that I edit on my page,
you generally like them?
I really like them because it shares a story that I haven't shared before. Because people look at my Instagram, they think, "Oh, this guy's page is all dark, everything's professional," and then they go in my reels, and I'm
derpy.
I'm derpy as fuck.
The one with the dancing, you face planning, in the studio, yo,
I was so scared.
that was, and you've never shared that before.
No,
you
I
had
really-
that saved up like 10 years ago or something.
Yeah,
Yo,
I was in
shout out.
high school.
Shout out to that one, man.
But I think in terms of episode, really, I think Bao and Brendan were two of my favorite episodes.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people don't know. I consider Bao and Brendan as two mentors of mine. Bao taught me a lot of magic. That's why I have a spade behind my ear too. They teach me a lot about things. Bao taught me a lot about running a business on the back end, having a good business process. Brendan taught me a lot about people relationship, and also he's my speaking coach. And that's how I am able to be media trained and talk comfortably in front of people, because he drilled me to be able to talk like this. And having two of my mentor or two of my closest friends that's been there supporting me throughout the years, I think it was a different experience having just two people I look up to being able to tell their stories on a platform.
Having them on the podcast,
I think that's
Full
one
circle.
of my biggest achievement, and just being like, hey, you guys think it's because you guys taught me how to be successful that I am able to have you guys on a platform today.
Yeah.
I think that's why I really appreciated those episodes.
Yeah. Similar to you, I think, obviously I loved all our guests, but, the guest episodes where I brought on people from my life, like whether, they're people I currently interact with on a daily basis or people from my past, the fact that they even wanted to come on the podcast, it was such a good feeling. It's just so, kind of validating that I'm doing something right? And I feel like it's also caused me to get closer or reconnect with a lot of these people, Jenna, Daniel, as soon as we started posting, he reached out on Instagram. He's like, hey, I know we haven't spoke in a long time, but I would love to I have to pull up on the pod. That's how he said it.
Wow.
Andy, the fact that we met, a couple of years ago, just as we were starting this, when we were introducing each other before we moved into to Toronto together.
Yeah.
He was telling me that he had a podcast. I'm like, no fucking way, I have a podcast too. And then for that
Crazy.
to go full circle, and for him to have come on. Same thing with Trevor, another full circle moment. I met him when I first started my job, and first day on my job, I was telling him about the pod too, and now boom, he's there. So outside of the guest episodes, some of my favorites have been recent. Leaving the Nest and Love Through Rose Tinted Glasses. The reason why I say that's been my favorite is I actually, when I was re-listening to them, like on my train ride over, I got new insight. Even though I was in that conversation, listening back, I'm like, yeah, you were really vulnerable about some of the stuff you were worried about, and it was really related to our lives, and it got me thinking. It got me, I do need to change that, or I do need to kind of look deeper and see why I'm like that, and to see from going to not being able to finish an episode because it was too cringe to now getting insights from it.
Like learning from your own podcast.
Yeah, learning from my own podcast.
Full circle too, man.
That's sick. That's sick. A lot of full circle stuff going on.
So I just want to jump to the second question from Nola again. Will you be releasing new merch in season 2? And I think that question is straight to Jay.
Oh, geez. This has been a conversation since season 1. Yes, there will be merch coming. We're going to start small. We're going to start, we're going to focus mainly the brand, Kill Your Pride. We want to emphasize Killing Your Pride, KYP. So again, it's full circle because we're going back to the brand now, because it started as a brand and we started as a podcast and we're going back to the brand. So, but now because we have the identity, the mission, it's more, the vision is clear now. I think we're ready to do the merch. So more to come.
Yeah, and you mentioned we were thinking about it from the very beginning, but I think the timing
could have been better.
Yeah, it could not have been better now. I feel like it might have been too early any sooner.
Yeah.
So now we're going to jump into another question by Nico. Who are your dream guests for the show?
Oh, shout out Nico.
I think Kevin, you have more. You'd love to have certain guests on the show.
Yeah, so if we're talking like no bounds, like a genie came out of a lamp, he's like, I'll set it up for you right now. I think, he might be a controversial figure to some, but definitely Joe Rogan, because I was 100% inspired by him. Not about any specific guest he has on or any specific topic or any specific thing he does, but just the fact that he also embodies that idea of you can learn from everybody. You can, and he makes an effort to kind of get to know and understand people from all different walks of life, even if they're, people he doesn't agree with or people who are in completely different fields, from scientists to authors to, entertainers.
Yeah.
Because I came from such a mindset of being in a clique, being exclusive, not giving the time to people who are outside of my immediate circle. Listening to Joe Rogan was the first time I saw somebody do that. He's a comedian. Why is he talking to, neuroscientists? It doesn't make sense. And that kind of slowly started to open my mind. So Joe would be big. And then, okay, this is a different angle. If I can ever get to the point in my relationship with my father and have him on and have these fucking open conversations.
Oh, damn.
Oh, geez.
That's fucking wild. But that's I would say my chances of getting into Harvard Law School right now is higher than that happening. So that's another dream.
You're putting it out there.
Putting it out there. Yeah.
Okay. You, Dany?
I think I don't really have anyone in mind when it comes to a dream guest. I'm just happy to be part of a podcast and sharing stories of people. I think if we're talking again, no boundaries, Genie Lamb comes, grants me a wish. I'll wish for another wish, and then I'll probably ask for Jordan Peterson to come.
Oh, Jordan's an interesting one.
I think as controversial as he is, I'd love to pick his brain on certain topics. He is so well spoken that I think he has something very interesting to say on a lot of topics that we talk about, killing your pride. And similar again to Kevin, I would say I'd love to have my father come on the podcast and just talk about how hard it was being raised as having a single mother. Because my grandfather was never in the picture. He passed away in the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
And how hard it was to maintain 2 kids, total poverty, working his ass off for me to have a platform here today. I think my dad, he'd have so much wisdom. He's the reason why I'm here today. And I take a lot from him. That's why he named me, my middle name actually, Duc Duy, in Vietnamese, actually means golden boy.
Hey, let's go.
So I think I take a lot from my dad, his determination and his meticulousness to succeed even though all odds are against you. So I'd love to have my dad on the podcast.
Man, you guys went deep on this one. I don't have anyone particular for the Genie in the Bottle guest. I definitely want to do, and I think this is possible. I want dumbfounded Timothy DeLaGhetto, Kev Jumba, Ryan Higa.
The folks we grew up on.
Yeah,
that would be crazy.
That'd be the full circle moment right there.
Yeah.
I looked up a lot to Kev Jumba and Timothy DeLaGhetto, just like
Timothy
you.
was the closest one.
Timothy was like my fashion guy. He always did like fashion hauls, and I was like, wow, these are so cool. Like he had a very skater fashion, and Kev Jumba was the guy that got me into sea walking, into dancing, because his first few videos were him just dancing in his lawn or whatever. So those are the people that I would want to speak with and just pick their brains. But family wise, I do agree. You guys sparked something in me. My grandfather passed away a couple of years ago, but I would love to have him on the podcast. That'd be another Genie in a Bottle, I guess. But because so both my grandparents, a very interesting story, but I don't really know it. They've never told me directly. I've always heard it from my parents. So my grandma's actually North Korean, and during the war, the Korean War, she had to immigrate. She immigrated down to South Korea for what it is now. Just that journey, and she lost her sisters and her brothers. They stayed back in North Korea, but she basically immigrated alone. So I always thought that would be such an interesting story. And she's kind of like me, or I'm kind of like her. She doesn't really talk. She's very quiet, but I'm sure she has lots of things to say. And my grandfather, man, he came from an abusive family. So his brother was abusive. He didn't grow up with his parents, and he went through a lot of trauma. But the man's traveled all the way to South America, opened 2 businesses, raised a family, and moved his family to Canada.
He started it all. Yeah.
He was like a real hustler, never given up. Always try to chase something better for his family. So shout out to him, and that's it.
Okay, so now we have an anonymous question, but I'm pretty sure I know who this came from. Who's the best athlete in the group and who's the worst? I'm going to go right away. I'm the worst athlete. I do not work out at all. My pull-up game weak as fuck. My running game weak as fuck. My ankle would break as soon as I run away. I'm the type of person that would die as soon as a black bear chase after me. I would be the one who's holding back the group in a zombie apocalypse. I would give all the weapons to my friend and then fucking die in peace.
Can we put a beat on that?
Those bars, man. Those bars.
All right, James.
Skinny leg.
Could we decide this on an arm wrestling competition?
Hell no.
since you were so gracious, to put your hand up for that, I think James, today might be your special day. This might not never happen again.
Oh shit!
But before I give it up,
before
I give it up, I just want to say, when it comes to hooping basketball, first 5 minutes when I still got my cardio, I'm fucking nice. All right. If there's any 5-minute leagues out there, I'm fucking nice. Turnaround jumper looking just like Kobe. Don't worry. But after 5 minutes, I have no cardio.
5-minute man.
5-minute man.
Oh man.
So yeah, James,
Good stuff.
I think you deserve this one because over the last year, you've really made fitness a focus, right? I see that, at first it started with CrossFit,
basketball.
CrossFit,
the main
basketball. Now you're doing F45.
Oh, CrossFit is at 45.
Yeah.
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 Okay.
Yeah.
So talk about that, man.
Yeah, just quickly. I mean, it comes down to the consistency part that I talked about earlier. That's something I'm chasing right now as a life goal. And I'm telling you, I'm not consistent. Like I don't work out 5 days a week, like people I know.
Maybe we just get the impression because you post videos of fitness. Maybe I'll go once a month, take a video, and you guys think I'm athletic.
But I did play basketball 2 to 3 times a week, every week during the summer. So that's something I really love as a sport. We connected through basketball when we were kids, and I try to continue that in Nuns Island, where we grew up playing basketball. So, because my friend lives there as well, the one who asked the question actually. So there's that, and we're looking good, man. You got to exercise to look good, look healthy, stay healthy, feel healthy. I know Dany, you're sort of doing that as well right now. You're doing some private lessons. So man, keep doing it. It's gonna. You don't see the rewards right away. It seems freaking hard right now. And
I'm fucking sore right now.
Yeah, you want to kill yourself just for being there and doing it. But in a few months' time, you're gonna feel just like a new man.
Yeah.
So keep doing it.
All right. So we have another questions from an anonymous source. How do you prepare for interviews, and what's your favorite part of the process?
Dany, you want to go?
Yeah,
The
definitely.
showrunner on that one.
I think being the showrunner, interviews are definitely one of the more stressful part of it because you don't know what's going on. And how I generally prepare for the guest is I'd love to know the background of the guest. Try to understand their speech cadence, try to understand how they process an idea. And that allows me to know when I'm going to jump in and when to ask a question. But a lot of times that's why we started implementing the mini interview episodes, because that makes me learn a lot more about the person.
Yeah.
And when it comes to the mini episodes, I generally take mental notes, or I think on Daniel's episode, you probably noticed I was taking notes on my iPad.
Yeah.
So I know exactly what it is. Number 2, I'd also do a lot of research on a guest because I would find different types of information that nobody has found yet.
Yeah, with Kelly.
Yeah, with Kelly.
Yeah.
I made a lot of research on him.
Yeah.
I think the way I look at it, especially for a guest interview, is as a person who don't know, let's say Kelly, James.
We never met him. Yeah.
I've never met that person.
Yeah.
And so I would ask the more interesting question, but below the surface. Not that, what did you eat today? How's the family? Whatever. Now, when it comes to actually having a podcast together, now we started implementing the fact that we talk about random topics that the guests are very interested in. How we process it is we come up with a general theme or a hook, something that we take to heart. And once we get that topic, now I make sure to separate it in 3 categories. The first category always has to be introducing the topic, slowly bringing in the viewer, like reeling them into a topic. And then the second part of it, so each part of it are 15 minutes. And I generally give a sign to the guys to know when we switch topic. The second one, after you reeled them in, you hit them with a negative question. Why are people acting this way? Why are people so negative about this? Hit them with a negative topic that sparks a conversation.
Yeah.
And then finally, at the last slice of 15 minutes, we mostly talk about how to englobe and finish off something that you can apply as a person,
A lesson.
something you can take as a lesson to really, after let's say you've been introduced to the topic, and then we throw you a reflection, we throw you an issue which makes you rethink about what you think in life. Finally, we just calm it off, the weather after the sun after the storm,
Yeah.
and then say, hey, these are our solutions. These are how we've managed to come,
Our experiences.
our
yeah.
experience, different solutions you can take. And that's how I organize our podcast, and that's how I organize our guest podcast.
Yeah, I think you covered most of it. You know,
The secrets
Yeah.
of the trade.
And in terms of just the general thing, I can't really teach this, but the active listening part is super interesting. I
hard.
can go deeper for the next half an hour to teach people how to actually ask good questions based on interviews and things like that. But
Yeah.
I think I'd love to just really hop into a next topic. And I think the guys would love to answer this is, what is the most fun and the most challenging thing about doing the podcast? Shout out to Raf, one of my good friends.
the most fun part is definitely what we're doing right now, being on the pod, like the in the room, the
process.
conversation, you know, the actual act of recording the pod. That's probably the funnest part. And then, you know, the challenging part is everything around it that holds it up, right? The operations, the logistics, the outreach, finding the guests, you know, managing our time, managing our pod with our responsibilities, you know, your businesses, our full-time jobs. That's all the difficult stuff, right? At least, you know, that's how I view it.
What's the most fun and challenging thing for you?
The most fun for this podcast, man, it's shooting the shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hanging out with you guys and recording it and making content. We're creating something new here, and I love how we just drink all the time on the podcast.
Yeah, we just drink.
we just drink and talk, man. It's
Therapeutic.
yeah, like I don't go to my friend's house and just talk to them
Yeah.
on the couch. We play a game or something.
Yeah.
We do sports, right? But we never just sit down for 3 hours and just talk about something, a topic. We're learning about ourselves, discovering new things, you know? And the hardest part, yeah, man, organization.
Yeah.
I'm learning that at work, and I'm learning that here. Consistency again, and we're gonna do it for the second season. All right, we're gonna see an improvement.
I think for me, the best thing about the podcast, number one, is changing people's lives, helping people out. And the most challenging thing about the podcast is just being the showrunner. I think
Oh yeah, it's tough. Shout out to you, man.
I have so much responsibility. Like, I'm in charge of
Just this.
the audio. I'm in charge of the visual, the photos, the audio, and the video, that feed that's going on. When I edit, I have to make sure to cut. While I'm recording the podcast, I'm also keeping track of the conversation. I have to lead the guys into the topic. I have to make sure that I ask the questions to keep the questions going. So there's a lot of moving pieces.
Yeah.
And I think every time I'm on the podcast, the guys notice is that I'm in my zone. I have to be concentrated in doing. I can't be distracted, because if I get distracted, the show gets
It will run.
Derails.
it derails into something different, and I can't bring it back.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, another area we want to kind of, for me and
To
James,
improve,
to
yeah.
develop in is starting to learn a little bit so we can take off some of the weight from your shoulders, right? Learning how to, you know, just set up the recording if you're unable to, or learn some of the show running or hosting. Because, you know, we made a lot of improvement as, you know, just contributing to the pod, but
Yeah.
the added element of tracking, you know, the audio, the video, the time, how much time we have left in this segment, the next segment, the topics, how do you bring it in, segue out, intro. You know, I think we're getting to the point where we're, you know, we've improved our skills contributing on the pod that now we can kind of build on that.
Multitask.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I could do a bit of the board.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you're.
If you cue me, like I'd be able to.
Yeah, that'd be.
We could try something like something
I'd be
new.
down.
Yeah.
And so I want to get to one of the few last questions. Someone anonymous asked, "What advice would you give someone looking to start their own podcast?"
What advice?
First thing is to make it.
Do it, yeah,
to
you're
do
right.
it,
Yeah, 100%.
Like the equipment and all that stuff is great, but the most important thing is just start recording yourself. Over time, if you keep doing it, then you can add those upgrades. I think Andy, our guest, who also had his own podcast, that's how he went. To this day, I don't think he has a mixing board or a proper microphone. It was just him,
In his room, recording.
expressing his thoughts
Yeah.
on his phone. Everybody has a smartphone. So I would say first step is to do it. Yeah.
Jay, any advice?
I think if you can do it with somebody, reach out.
Yeah.
If you hadn't reached out to me, if I hadn't reached out to Dany, it would have been a lonely road again. It sucks to do it alone, but if you have to do it, the first step, just do it. But if you can have a buddy, have a business partner, or somebody you want to work with, I think that's the best way to go forward.
I think beside the fact of the equipment, I'll throw another curveball because I think everyone has the same advice of just doing something.
Yeah.
My biggest advice for someone is have a mission, have a purpose to
yeah.
what you're doing. Because if you walk aimlessly trying to get something popular, you might blow up. Yeah, you might get a needle in a haystack. You might succeed. But if you don't know where you're going, it's like the head of a snake, right? Once you chop it off, it doesn't know where it goes. So once you have a purpose, it doesn't matter what equipment you have, who you're talking to, what you're talking about. Once you have a mission, it's a lot easier to narrow your focus. I think that's my biggest lesson.
Yeah.
Biggest advice, really.
Hope that helps. Wait, we're talking to the question now.
Well, figuring out our mission was I think we found that a little bit later, didn't we?
I think
It was a process.
Yeah, I think we refined the mission a little later.
It's
but
clearer
there was
now.
definitely
Yeah.
something.
It's a lot clearer now.
Yeah.
So just do it, and you will figure it out.
Yeah.
So another question from Sam is the guy's perspective in dating on Bumble. I think that could be a topic for season 2.
Absolutely.
Definitely. I think
at least me and James, I know we've had experience on Bumble. I don't know if you're...
I've had experience. It fucking sucks, but whatever.
Oh yeah, you definitely had some experience on Bubble.
We'll probably make I think that's a good episode.
I think we'll definitely note it down.
I would love to have, a female guest
Yeah.
who's also, had some experience with dating apps or with Bumble specifically.
Interesting.
To
That'd be cool.
Add that perspective. If I just had a quick word to say on that, on all the other apps, onus is on dudes to, come up with the opener, to open the conversation, right? And, on Tinder and stuff, you'll see bios that say, if you're just going to say hi, don't even bother. And so, every guy who's on the dating apps go through this process of coming up with creative things, looking at the profile or having pickup lines or all this stuff.
A lot of pressure already.
To try to open it.
Yeah.
When I first got Bumble, I was expecting, the women they're gonna cook.
Yeah.
But no, hey, hi.
They don't even try it.
No. So yeah, that's just a little teaser.
So Tyler, one of our guests, said y'all should kiss at the end. Unfortunately, Tyler, my girlfriend would fucking murder me if I did that. So thank you. I will pass on that offer.
Kevin and I might do it.
Yeah. On the condition that you pull up and do it with us. If it goes well, maybe we can start our OnlyFans together. Mass Hole and Mass Hole KYP OnlyFans.
Masshole itself sounds sexual. Crickets.
You know that joke, kid.
That scared the crap out of me.
All right. Anonymous asked, I'm pretty sure they asked Jay or any single one of us if we were single.
So just to explain that, I don't know if it's just me because I posted the same link on the KYP podcast. But okay, we could go a little round. It'd be very quick. No, I'm not single. Next.
No, I'm not single.
Yes,
Kevin?
I'm single.
Are you looking for somebody?
I would say so. I think, I had a casual approach to dating for a long time, but I feel like just like everybody else, I succumb to the idea that I have so many options, right? Every week I can find another person to go on a date with.
Yeah.
And I'm realizing that's an illusion. Your options are actually very limited if you think about it in the sense that the people, that you're attracted to, that also share all the values you're looking for, that are at similar stages in life.
They're getting married.
Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
A lot of them you might be in relationships already. A lot of them might not be compatible. So your pool is actually not as big as you think. And so it's made me kind of be a lot more selective of who I reach out to and who I spend time with. So slowly, I'm not in a rush. I feel like this is one of those things that comes when you're not looking for it and is actually very hard to find when you are. Single, hit me up.
What's your handle?
I'd like to end this season finale with a question from my good friend Isaac. He asked, what do we expect in season 2? What can we expect in season 2?
I'm just gonna say this because I'm guessing we're gonna maybe do a trip to another city.
Yeah, be mobile.
Bring the podcast on a mobile suit, and we're gonna be focusing on our guests. We're gonna be looking for more guests. We'll see about that. And then last one is go hard on social media, man.
Yeah.
And we got the content now.
This year has, very much been about making the podcast the full form. And we have limited time and resources, being the three of us. So social media, it's a very intensive task to kind of go through the full episodes, come up with interesting clips, and then actually edit them. So, we're going to make a huge effort to get you some more, short form content on the social media platforms. Hopefully we'll have more, funny clips.
There's a lot of value in our episodes. Yeah.
I'm sure James has plenty of material to troll me with.
Looking forward to it.
Put me in the best light always.
And so I wanted to wish all our viewers, again, thank you from the deepest part of our hearts for listening to the KYP podcast. Thank you for being so loyal after 50 episodes.
50 years.
Being so patient with us, with our really, how do you say that? Inconsistent posting schedules and some of our weird topics and some of our weird stories.
Putting up with our nonsense.
I think when it comes to the next season, really, we will make sure that formats will be a lot more comprehensible. We'll try to up the production when it comes to the podcast, bringing different guests who have a lot more knowledge in different topics that we'd love to share. I think season 1 really was a reflection of who we are as people. And I think what we need in season 2 really are professionals in their own field, helping us, but also helping you guys to achieve your true happiness, whether it is career, relationship wise, or socially.
Last thing, I also wanted to add community building. That's something I want to,
For next season.
really start getting into for next season. I know the finale, we asked you a question. First time we kind of broke the fourth wall and spoke directly to the viewers, asking for comments. I feel like doing more of that will help us get to know our audience better, and as a result produce a better show. And also we've been having folks come in, friends of the pod, past guests, to be behind the scenes, like live audience. So look forward to
things
that.
we're going to be working on. Yep.
And like always, for the last time of the year, my name is Dany. I'm here with my co-host,
KYP James.
Kevin G.
and remember,
To KYP.
Kill your pride, baby.